Hello everyone, my name is Jessica Pisani, and today I will be talking about the internalization of stigmas among parents of children with autism spectrum disorder, which will be referred to as ASD, for the remainder of this presentation in Nigeria. In talking about how the study was structured, really focuses on the way that parents specifically have self-stigma that have families with ASD, talking about the types of education of ASD that caregivers receive, the parental impact that they feel that other people have perceived on them, as well as the stigma of bad parenting, as Nigeria is a very traditional family structure. Usually the mother stays home and cares for the children, in which children with ASD do not always conform to these typical behavioral patterns of children. So when out in public, they have this stigma of, since the children are acting out, the parents, specifically the mother, are not keeping the household in check, or they don't have the set expectations that they're meeting. Then, in relation to our core social motives that we have been talking about throughout the past few chapters, it really helps hone in understanding, as this study is geared to evaluate others' education levels as it pertains to autism spectrum disorder, as well as attempts to understand and assess the internalization of stigmas from parents and caregivers due to the child's diagnosis and the family structure after. In talking about the samples that were utilized for this research, so the parents and caregivers were targeted specifically for this study. This study was conducted in Lagos, which is one of the westernmost states of Nigeria. There was a list compiled of all healthcare facilities, both public and private. And throughout that, there was a number of facilities selected from that list, and as long as families were receiving care at one of those said facilities, they were able to participate. So this is known as a continuous recruitment tactic, in which phase 1, 230 parents of autism spectrum disorder children were given a survey, and then in phase 2 we had 6 individual one-on-one interviews. So as we briefly mentioned what phase 1 and phase 2 looked like, phase 1 was a semi-structured questionnaire using a 7-point Likert scale of agreement, which ranges from one end being strongly disagree to the other end being strongly agree, and several steps in between. Several of these questions in phase 1 touched on things like demographic information, such as their age, their race, how many children are in the home, what their income levels were. The other section of phase 1 talked about the knowledge of symptoms. So this was, how does autism spectrum disorder manifest? What social cues do autism spectrum disorder children not have? Similar questions of those. And then the third section talks about the negative experiences as parents from their perspective. So one question that was highlighted throughout the study talks about people think less of me or my family because of my autism child, depending on how many children they had that were diagnosed in the family. Then moving on to step 2, there were 6 individual participants. They did one-on-one in-depth interviews with the researchers, in which some of them had a 5-point Likert scale. So this ranges from never to always, with steps in between as well. After the study had been conducted and they were evaluating the results, it found approximately 81% of families were employed that have children with autism spectrum disorder. Their knowledge of autism spectrum disorder, approximately 48% of parents rely on healthcare workers for their information about ASD, and almost 32% of families turn to the media. Then talking about their stigma that others have projected onto them, approximately 40% of parents feel other people's judgment while out in public with a child with ASD. 48% of parents think that a person is afraid of someone with autism spectrum disorder while out in public. Approximately 33.5% of parents agree that their quality of life has been drastically impacted due to having a child with ASD. And just over 50%, so 53% of parents agree with having usually a negative experience while out in public, especially with a child with ASD. So as previously mentioned, we had talked about the stigma that people have been projected onto, and then talking about the self-stigma, so how parents internalize how they feel while out in public. 75% of parents agree with the statement, people without a child with ASD could not possibly understand me. 46% agree with the statement of being around people who do not have a child with ASD makes them feel out of place or inadequate. 40% of parents agree with the statement that ASD exerts a negative impact on them. And 83.5% of parents self-stigmatize. So talking about families that don't have a child with ASD don't understand what they're going through. They make them feel out of place while out in public or within their friend group. Just overall not having a great experience with their child growing up. And it's really important to note the statistical significance that was drawn within this study. So the level of education, monthly family income, and enacted stigma were all highly significant, in which that implication shows that the people with the lowest education exhibit the highest amount of stigma that they have. As these results have been evaluated, we can talk about how they can be applied to society in general. It is important not to generalize these results globally, as there are different issues with specific cultures. So if we view certain cultures as individualistic or collectivist, and what that may look like. And then this really opens the way for similar studies to be enacted in different areas of cultures. So cultures that are traditionally collectivistic may additionally be studied to see if this is similar or the same, and then how we can move forward in future directions based on the research shown in this study. So as it was important to note, education to ASD families primarily came from two main outlets, being healthcare workers as well as the media. And so making sure that the education that these families are receiving is pertinent, is correct, is non-biased, so that these families don't feel stigmatized even further. Talking about education to general population as it results to ASD. So as these people have perceptions of what may be happening with ASD families, it's important to note how these families are different, but also how they are the same. And then as a lot of these parents showed, they have significant amount, not only stigma brought on by the public, but self-stigma that they have generalized themselves. Offering counseling services or really honing in counseling or therapy as to what this may look like and how they can reverse these self-stigmatizing assets that they have had. And so I think this is a really great area that we can go in future directions, and how the implications of this study based in Nigeria can really help other areas and really draw forces going forward. But thank you all so much for listening, and I hope that we all have a great day. Thank you.